we are going to kick off and get things moving. So for those, I think everybody here knows who I am, but Clifford Morgan, a leadership expert, organizational psychologist, background in the military. And for the last 6 years, I've been consulting in the leadership team and strategy space, really working with leaders to help them get the most out of their people at work. And one of the topics that we have been it's been on my radar. I've been discussing it a lot lately with clients and potential clients and everybody else. And that is the topic of being an employer of choice. And so we're going to delve into that today. It really is a bit of a holy grail at the moment, considering the context that we're in. And so hence, pursuing the holy grail, becoming the employer of choice is the title of this session. And it is going to be interactive. I am going to ask you to throw some things in the chat. If you do have questions, given that it is just a small group, feel free to jump off mute and just say, hey, Cliff, I've got this question. More than happy for you to do that and ask as we go. There will be time at the end of the session for questions as well. But when I wanted to start by kind of asking you, when I say employer of choice, what are the things that jump into your head? What comes to mind? What are those things for you that flash through your brain, whether it's images or words or phrases or language, when you hear the term employer of choice? Throw it in the chat. I'd love to see what comes up for you.
Cliff, are you talking about throw it in the chat verbally?
No, so the chat box.
Oh, yep.
So we'll use that today and put questions in there, and I'll periodically kind of be asking you guys to think about certain things and how does it relate to you. Put it in the chat and I'll refer it and reference it as I see it, and we'll go from there. Albie, great to have you on. Good to see you, mate. We're just getting started, and the question that I've asked is, when you hear the term employer of choice, what comes through your mind? Throw it in the chat box. So Stephen said, when employees approach you for a job rather than you advertising. Yes, right? So it's very, an employer of choice is attractive, which is great. Robbie's saying clear structure of processes for onboarding. Yeah, these are some of the things that really good organizations do. John's saying the employer or organization that has a highly talented individual seeking them out for opportunities. And these are all exactly along the lines of what we understand this concept of being an employer of choice to be. If we start to look at defining it, there's a couple of definitions here. I've selected some different ones because they have a different emphasis. And the reality is that there are many different definitions, I guess, floating around because people have different priorities and different emphases. So Care Corporate here, they've said an employer that has built and nurtured a workplace environment that attracts and retains the most talented employees. So the focus there is really an environment within which staff work. Definition.com, all right, the most authoritative source on the internet, I'm sure, but it says the employer of choice is a term used to describe public or private employees whose practices, policies, and benefits and the overall conditions are enabled to successfully attract and retain talent. So again, the focus there is practices, policies, and benefits. You can see that the different emphasis there. This one's interesting. So HRD, the HR Director magazine, someone whom workers choose to work for when presented with other employment choices. So this choice is a conscious decision that staff make when joining an organization or deciding to stay. So the emphasis there is it's around someone, not just an organization. They're actually talking about people there, and they're actually talking about the conscious choice that staff make. Which is, again, another aspect here of this concept that we're talking about. And finally here, I kind of like this one that's from Work Healthy Australia, where it says, employer company offers well-structured initiatives and strategies promote and encourage well-being, success, and productivity across its workforce. Put simply, the employer of choice creates a positive workplace, and the result of that is that they attract and retain highly skilled staff. And so again, there's a number of different ways that people they define what an employer of choice is, and it's one of those things where an employer of choice is going to look different for different industries and for different people. People have different priorities, they have different preferences, and therefore what meets their needs and what is their choice is going to be slightly different as well. And some of the initiatives that are put in place in the software industry in order to be an employer of choice is going to look very different from, say, the mining industry or even the finance sector. And so it's going to look different depending on where you are, depending on the context within which you find yourselves in. That being said, I want to talk through a number of core elements that help different leaders be able to pursue this concept or pursue becoming an employer of choice, regardless of which industry or sector they are in. And the next question really, it's sort of that I ask is why is it important? And that's kind of obvious for a lot of people that are in leadership roles today. We have such the war for talent is the term that keeps getting thrown around. But the reality is we do have a skills shortage. The National Skills Commission has said that at the end of last year, there were 286 occupations that has skill shortages. And that's up from over 150 in 2021. So it's almost doubled in that 12-month period. So there's a drastic shortage of work. And at the same time, the turnover has gone through the roof as well. A recent report from ARI has said that 60% of executive leaders believe that the turnover rate within their organization is too high. And when we start talking about turnover, the ABS stats say that in 2022, 1.3 billion people changed jobs. That's an average of 9.5 or almost 10% of the workforce changed jobs last year. And if we look, that's been steadily increasing over time since about 2015. But when we look at the professional sector, which many of the people that I interact with fall into, the average across the professional sector is 22%. That's over 1 in 5 people are changing jobs in the last 12 months. So if you've got a team of 10, then the statistics are kind of saying that potentially 2 of your people potentially may leave in the next 12 months. And that comes at a big cost, right? $3.8 billion they reckon have lost in productivity due to staff turnover, 385 million in recruitment costs that could have been avoided. And the average cost to replace a position is around that almost $24,000. So the costs are massive, right? And I want you to put in the chat, if you in your workplace are currently recruiting or hiring or have done so recently, how many of that is you? Because I know when I walk into clients, they always seem to be looking for recruiting somebody or some new role almost every time that I see them. It seems to be this constant thing that's going on. And those clients that are really successful and maintain profitability, many of those are the ones that are able to reduce turnover as much as possible. And so the question is, lots of recruitment, Albie. Yeah, particularly in your job. I know that in your particular role, that's obviously one of the areas that you focus on, and which is great. So when we think of employee and employer of choice, what are some of the benefits that you have seen or potentially your organization has put in place, some of those initiatives or things that they've done to be more attractive to staff? Both to attract new staff, but also to keep the ones that they have. Throw those in the chat. I'm really interested to see what some of those different initiatives are. I get to see a lot of them in my travels and working with different organizations. And while you're putting them in the chat, here is a couple of different things that I know when most people think employer of choice, they think office space, right? And so we've got, Google has slippery slides in their office space. The neighborhood have tree houses, which I actually really like. I think that'd be cool. Get to, hey, where are we having this meeting at 1:30? Let's go up to the tree house. That's reminds me of my childhood. And then one of my favorites, right, is Invention Land, where their office space actually has a pirate ship in it, which is really cool. And look, I am all for having a great fit out in the workspace and making it attractive and really comfortable and enjoyable experience aesthetically to kind of step into the workplace. I think it's a great thing. But the question is, do we actually really need pirate ships to become employers of choice? So Albie's saying on-site accommodation and cash bonuses. Yeah, these are things that I hear a lot. And some of those other ones is some of the social activities, activities that are well-being focused have a lot of momentum, I guess, or there's a lot of interest in, whether that's yoga classes or whether that's coming and getting masseurs into the workplace, which is interesting. John's saying clear development pathways is really important, and we'll come to how that kind of plays in a little bit later. John. Robbie's saying having meaningful and important work, so important. And again, we'll talk about that in a little. Friday afternoons off is, yes, the EKO, the early knockoff, is a good one, and good equipment, right? And that's, I would almost argue that good equipment, really, whether you're an employer of choice or not, it's just looking after your people. Enabling them to do their work is a big thing. But the question is, do we need pirate ships? Do we need all of these different things to be able to be employers of choice? And what I would say is that we can do all those things and really make the employee experience amazing. But at the same time, if we do all of these without a whole lot of other things to create healthy organizations, then we're not actually going to get or become this employer of choice, right? Really becoming an employer of choice, it does not happen in a vacuum. And so when I start talking about this, it's what's the context within which the experience of being an employer of choice exists. And I like to use this analogy here where we look at balanced results. We've got organizational results, which are really focused on the health and the performance of the organization, right? We've got the customer results here, which are really focused on providing a great customer experience, but also maximizing the value that our customers or our clients get. And then we get the employee results, which is really around good culture. And so often when we start thinking about employer of choice, we focus on the culture piece. We focus on the employee results and the employee experience. But let me tell you, without the other two, it doesn't matter if you've got great culture, because the people aren't going to want to work for you. See, if an organization is not performing and it's actually under financial strain, and there's a whole lot of reputational damage and things that are going on there, despite the fact that they have slippery slides in the workplace fit out's great. They've got a great development pathway. They have EKOs on a Friday afternoon. They do all the things to make a great employee experience. But if it's not a healthy organization and the performance isn't there, then people aren't going to want to work for that organization. They don't want to be associated with an unhealthy organization. And at the same time, clients and customers aren't necessarily going to want to be there, right? The culture and the employee experience is supported by the customers that are coming in and the performance and the health of the organization. And see, really the employer of choice, it comes when we have a healthy and a strong and a performing organization that achieves great results in that space. And it combines good culture and good employee experience. That's where you get this employer of choice piece. But at the same time, when we have a strong company that has a good client experience that provides value, that's when we become a brand of choice. This is where the reputation starts to come in. The combination here of being a employer of choice plus being a brand of choice is what people find really attractive. All right. And so that's where we attract the high performers and the good talent. But it's also we attract investment from investors. We attract new clients and new customers, and our existing clients and customers are willing to refer us on. And we get this brand loyalty, the coming back, which is really important as well. And the combination there between the good culture and the great value, the employee results and the customer results means we become a service of choice or a product of choice. That means our clients are going to keep coming back. As I said before, they're going to refer us and we're going to have clients coming to us as well. Right. And all of this together means we become an organization of choice. And this is really what I kind of want to just frame this whole concept around. You cannot be an employer of choice without the support and the structure of the broader context, right? And so being an organization of choice supports the employee experience. And so that's really important. And I just wanted to unpack kind of each of those, because really what I like to do in these sessions is equip you guys, equip the leaders that we have online. So how do you actually go about doing that? And we'll focus in on those things that really do enhance the employee experience towards the back end and give you some practical strategies. So when we're talking about organizational results and performance, first of all, the business has to be profitable, right? If the organization is under financial strain, then it doesn't matter how good the culture is. It doesn't matter how good the clients are. It's going to affect everything. I remember being involved in a big organization where they were quite prominent. I won't give the name of the organization because of what I'm about to say, but that particular organization had really mismanagement at the senior leadership level. There was financial mismanagement that went on. There was mismanagement of resources, and it became a bit of an empire building scenario. And the organization really suffered in terms of its results, its health, profitability went down. And as a result, things got really, really unhealthy. And at the end of that, the reputation of the organization was quite damaged. And what ended up happening was the senior executive got switched out, changed out, given the boot. And there was a massive big restructure and cultural change and reformation that went on as a result of that. And the reality was that people did not want to work there. In terms of people going there, and the people that were working there were looking for other jobs when I was there, and they were just waiting to find the right opportunity to jump ship. And the actual people were really good people. A lot of the elements of culture was actually really good while I was there, but because of the poor leadership and the mismanagement of the performance piece, things got really, really bad. And so we need to have a profitable business model where we are actually making money. There isn't financial strain on it. Well, what we don't want is employees wondering whether or not they're going to get paid. It's one of the quickest ways for people to, question whether or not they're going to stay. And so it needs to be financially stable. It needs to be profitable. It needs to be productive, right? Organizations need to be productive. They need to be actually producing things, doing good work, and achieving results. With this one, it's interesting that being productive is not just about having good systems in place, but it's also a leadership's ability and willingness to remove obstacles becomes really important in this space as well. And finally, in the organizational results piece, there needs to be a level of probity. It's around the integrity, the ethics of the organization. I spoke before about that organization. Really, the root of it was a lack of this, and the integrity and financial probity and all that sort of thing there was what led it all astray in the first place. And it's particularly important, right, for the younger generations that are coming through. They are much more worried and focused on purpose and ethics, and they are less likely to look over any unethical decisions, or even, you know, into the ethics of supply chain gets a big focus, I guess, in modern times as well. So all of that needs to be there in order to be to have good organizational results, and they all support being an employer of choice. And so the next piece, right, is around the customer results. And I want to tell a story here really quickly. I used to live out in Ipswich, and there was a cafe that I used to frequent for several years. There was a new one that opened up around the corner, and I walked in for the first time, and the barista, the owner of the cafe, was behind the coffee machine. She had kind of the wild, crazy hair, but she had a big smile on her face. She said, "Hey, how you going? Nice to meet you. Welcome." Took my name and my order, and gave me coffee. And I had a great experience, right? You know, it was really good quality coffee. The interaction that I had with the owner was really positive, made me feel good, and it was cheaper than the other cafe. You know, only by about 40 cents or something like that, but it made me feel great. I went back 2 or 3 days later, and the owner remembered my name, remembered my order, and repeated the great experience that I have. And I'd be going to this other cafe for 3 or 4 years, and they didn't know my name and order. And so I had this great experience there. And for the $3.50 that I used to pay for coffee, I got super amount of value. And so when we start talking about employee results and the value that people get, I think that little story really highlights what we're talking about. First part of value and customer results, it needs to be economical. And we need to be providing value for money. And that's not to say that we can't charge a premium price, but we need to be able to justify it, and people need to see that it's worth paying the price that we charge for the service or product that we provide. We need to have a great experience. It needs to be easy to engage with. It shouldn't be hard. It should be enjoyable, right? It should really just be this, we should walk out saying, hey, that was a really good experience. I really enjoyed that. And that needs to be a focus in this space as well. And we need to be emotionally engaging. And that means we feel good at the end of it. And, you know, part of it is if we perceive value for money and we have a good experience and we get the good social interaction that's going in there, we feel good. And in that cafe I was telling you about, I felt valued because they remembered my name. They remembered my order. They remembered me. I felt seen. I felt valued. And combined with the good experience of great coffee, the economic benefits of it, I just walked away as saying, this is great value. And the reality is that perception of value will open the door, but it is the realization of value that will keep customers coming back, right? And so we need to be mindful that we are focused on providing great value. And so if you think about your work, which one of these three are you really intentional about? Is it you know, are you focused on or really intentional about providing an economic service? Is it more around the experience? Or do you focus on making sure that great customer service makes people feel valued, feel seen, and have an emotionally engaging experience? Put it in the chat. What's your focus in your role? The final one here, right, is culture. And this is where we start to move on to the employee results, the employee experience. And when I start talking about this, there are many different aspects of culture, and knowing some of the people that we've got on the line, you know this, and I don't want to kind of, you know, just give you a bunch of stuff that you don't know, right? But three aspects really that are specific to culture when it comes to becoming an employer of choice. And the first one here is cultivation. It's really around developing your people. I loved, John, that you said earlier that a strong and clear development pathway was really important as, or it comes to the front of your mind when you start thinking about employer of choice. And it's so true. We need to be cultivating people, developing their skill set, developing their capability. And that is really important there. We'll go into a little bit around that in a minute. Also, employers need to be, or employees, staff, need to feel like they're making a great contribution. And this is all around the meaning of work, right? If people can't understand how what they do contributes to the bigger picture or what is really meaningful for them, then they're not going to be motivated. The morale's not going to be there. And ultimately, they don't engage and build culture, right? They're not, their results around those particular areas aren't being realized for them as individuals. And the final aspect here that I wanted to talk about is the connection, all right? Really good quality relationships becomes super important. And this is connection with individuals. It's connection with their leaders and management. It's also connection with the team and the client, right? All of these things are really, really important. And specifically for the millennials and Gen Zs and those that are coming through at the moment. See, they are focused. If we look at the two on the outside, their cultivation and connection, they want up to 50% more development in their workplace than previous generations did. And so employers and leaders need to be aware of that. They need to kind of meet those needs. If those needs aren't going to be met, then they're going to find somewhere else that does meet those needs. They'll choose somebody else, and you won't be the employer of choice. But the really interesting thing about millennials is they don't want just any development. They actually want development from their immediate supervisor. They want a mentor type relationship with their managers. And it really kind of highlights the need for cultivation and connection because they want the connected cultivation in this way, right? They want the mentoring to come through. So as we kind of delve into each one of these and start to really think about how do we build great culture? How do we provide a great employee experience in order to be an employer of choice? I want to focus first on the cultivation piece. What's your go-to when it comes to developing other people, your people, the people that you lead? What's the mechanism that is your go-to? Is it one-on-ones? Is it sending people away on learning? Is it getting people to present on lunch and learns? What's your favorite or go-to mechanism for developing people? For me, right, it is asking questions. It's coaching. For those of you that know me, I am an executive coach, and it's my favorite kind of method. And that's why I wrote the Coaching Leader book last year, right? It's all about leading through coaching and using questions. But this is why it's so important, and this is why asking questions and coaching is a really important part to being an employer of choice, right? Because when we ask questions, we have smart people on our team. And so we ask questions, we force them to think. They're going to have insight, all right? And when people get this flash of insight, the penny drop moment, that actually feels really good because we get a hit of dopamine, which is really, really important. It's really good because it makes us feel good. It makes us feel like we've achieved something. But dopamine is not just associated with achievement. Its primary purpose in the brain, neurochemically, is to drive motivation. So when we get this spike of dopamine, we actually become more motivated. We feel good. We become more motivated. Here's the other thing about dopamine is that when it's used in the brain, the byproduct is actually adrenaline. So we get energized and we've got good energy. But when we have adrenaline and the combination with acetylcholine, which is another neurochemical, is the combination, this magic combination that allows us to focus in on our work. And so that combination means we feel good, we're energized, we're motivated, and we're more focused as a result. And that means that we are more productive and we are more proactive, which means we achieve more in the workplace. We get this great sense of achievement and progress, which means we become more satisfied in the workplace. And so again, this is what happens when we develop people. This is what happens when we ask questions, and it's neurochemically what's going on inside. It's why coaching is my go-to when it comes to cultivating capability within individuals and people. John's saying one-on-one, finding out their why, making sure that he supports and coach them towards peak performance, which is great, John. Albie's saying one-on-ones are his go-to as well. Yeah, so it's really interesting if we start looking at some of the behaviors of transformational leaders. One of the research tells us that individual consideration is one of those behaviors that is really important. It's being able to sit down and treat people as individuals and tailor the way that you develop them to them as an individual, right? It's not just saying, here's the 3 development strategies and everybody's going to go through them. It's around getting to know the individual, treating them as a unique person and tailoring the development initiative to that. Again, which is why I love coaching, because it's a skill set that is very versatile and you can tailor it to the individuals very easy. And so that becomes really important. Now, when it comes to contribution is massive. And there's some really nice research that I liked when I'm talking about this, and it's really around contributing to something that's meaningful, right? And so there's some research that I've got here from Catherine Bailey and Adrian Madden, who are academics over in the States that have done, in the UK, that have done some really nice research, and they summarize some qualities of meaningful work, but also some behaviors that destroy work, right? And so I wanted to put these in here because I think they are a really nice summary of what you as leaders can do to promote the culture and the feeling of contribution that develops the great employee experience. The first one of these things, meaningful work needs to be meaningful to others. And so it's not just, hey, this is awesome, I'm doing this work, I really enjoy it, I find it meaningful. But this quality of meaningful work is that it makes a contribution to others. It actually serves others. The impact of the work is it makes other people's lives better. And that, if it's an internally facing role, then your work might be impacting and meaningful and serving other people within the organization. For many of us, it's actually our clients and our customers that it's meaningful to, right? But if we are just doing something by ourselves and we enjoy it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be meaningful. It's not going to drive or meet that contribution need. The next one is positive and negative emotions. This is a really interesting one that surprised me. For the majority of, or the vast majority of people, meaningful work, it produces not just positive emotions, it produces negative emotions as well. And the reality is that anything meaningful is going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, right? Meaningful work is hard. And therefore, it's going to be frustrating. It's going to be, we're going to have all those emotions that are associated with hard work. It's going to be tiring. It's going to be stressful. There may be pressure. It's going to produce negative emotions as well, but it also produces those positive emotions. A lot of people think about meaningful work and a great employee experience is that it's all sunshine and rainbows. And that's simply not the case. If you are doing meaningful work, then you're going to experience negative emotions as well. But at the same time, it has meaningful moments. So you're going to be peaks and there are going to be troughs. And the meaning is often realized in specific moments. That means that, not every task that you do in your work is going to be meaningful. And so, if I'm sitting down and I'm just thinking about some of the different mundane things that I do, whether that's doing some of the background administration, if I'm doing data analysis of some of the team data that I've collected, if I'm researching a particular topic, I don't necessarily find these things meaningful. I actually find coaching and engaging with people really meaningful, right? But I don't do that every minute of every day. And so the meaning in the work is often realized over time. And that kind of relates to the next one, is that the work prompts reflection, and people are able to reflect back on the hardship that they've done, on the progress that they've made, on the contribution that has accumulated over a series of time. And that's what they find really meaningful, as opposed to moment by moment meaning. And finally, it's deeply personal, right? And so that means it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before around tailoring things to people, because people will find different things meaningful. And just because you say, hey, this is really meaningful for me to do, I want to give it to somebody else so they can find it meaningful as well. It doesn't necessarily translate. And so you do have to kind of consider that when you're engaging. But I put this up here because it's really good for leaders to say, hey, how do I help facilitate this sense of contribution? How do I create work that is meaningful for my people? And you can do these, right? You can ask questions about, hey, have you thought about the positive impact on other people that your work is doing? Hey, I just share the story. I was just interacting with this customer, and they told me that the work you did really made a positive impact on them, and they appreciate it so much. And you can highlight the fact that the work that people are doing is more meaningful, right? You can talk about during the tough times when people are experiencing negative emotions, you can say, well, hey, remember how good it was when we were at that mountaintop. How good is it going to be when we get up to the top and we finish this particular task, right? And you can kind of talk about how and reflect on all the positive moments, the positive emotions that you've had. And then when you're in those moments, right, when you have succeeded, you can reflect back on the hardship and the negative emotions, which actually highlights the contrast and makes the positive emotions feel so much more intense, right? It makes the positive more positive in that way. So if you're aware of these as leaders, what you can actually do is try and highlight these different aspects as you interact with your people day to day, again, increasing that sense of contribution. I want to know, is any one of these 5 qualities, do they resonate with you more than others? I had some really great feedback just yesterday. Actually, I was in a workshop. It was a really tough couple of days. And I look back and I'm like, hey, all the hardship that I went through, all the negative emotions that I had engaging with these particular executives and preparing for it and the stress that I was under, it actually makes this piece of feedback so much more meaningful for me. Just a recent example there. Now, what I also mentioned, right, was that the research that I was referring to, where this comes from, they talk about the 7 deadly sins where we remove the meaning from our work. And I want to highlight these because these are the things that you as leaders need to avoid if you want to be employers of choice. So the first one is disconnecting people from their values, right? And we all know how important values are and values alignment is. So we want to make sure that people's work is aligned with their values. If we are violating people's values, then that's not a great enhancement to culture, right? Then we take stuff for granted. Obviously, people aren't going to feel appreciated. They're not going to want to work for someone who takes them for granted. They give people pointless work to do. Which is often the case as well for poor managers. They treat people unfairly. They override people's better judgment, and kind of it's like the micromanaging thing, right? And they disconnect people from supportive relationships, particularly in the workplace. They isolate others and they put people in harm's way. All of these things, people are like, well, why do I keep coming to work? What's the point of coming to work if any of these behaviors are being demonstrated by managers? And I want to ask you, what's been the most prominent throughout your career? Has there been one of these? It may not be in the organization that you're in now, but throughout your career, has one of these been more prominent than any other? Put it in the chat and see what comes up. I think for me, that taking staff for granted one is a really big one that I've seen quite a lot throughout my career. And, personally experienced one of the worst, the points in my career where I've turned up to work and gone, well, what's the point of continuing to turn up? It was when the supportive relationships in that workplace were destroyed. Or we were all isolated and broken up, and the relationships were dispersed, I guess, is probably the best way. And that really sucked the meaning out of coming to that particular workplace for me. So staff being taken for granted is huge, that you've seen, Albie, and overriding people's better judgment. Yeah. Sort of saying, hey, I want your input, but then just overriding it straight away. And people are, again, what's the point? And when we look at meaning and the sense of contribution that people make, we can look at it 4 different levels here. And it's the task level, the role, the organization, and the relationships. So John's saying, same, taking stuff for granted, saw it far too often. Albert's saying, seen many leaders disabling their teams as well. And again, disconnected from supportive relationships. Yeah, 100%, Stephen. So some common themes coming through there with all of us. And again, identifying these, clearly articulating them, means that we can be intentional about avoiding them as we move forward. Now, really quickly here, right? If people can't see how the task that they are doing contributes to the bigger picture, whether that's the organizational mission and vision, whether that's the value to the customers, whether that's the impact within to other people on their team, if they can't see the contribution that they're making, then the work's going to be meaningless for them. So as leaders, one of the things that we can do is highlight and articulate to people, hey, when you do this, it helps this, which allows us to achieve that. And that can provide a great level of meaning for people as there. Same with the role, right? What are the impacts of the role? If people feel like their role is redundant, then they're not going to want to stay. The purpose and meaning of the organization becomes really important. As I mentioned, the more important to the younger generations that are coming through is the contribution that the organization is making to the community and the society. Right. And finally, meaning and contribution is found in relationships as well. I can think of one of the first roles I had outside of my schooling was actually, it was a laborer's role. It was unloading 30-kilo boxes of Danish pork out of a container onto a pallet. And it was really some of the most meaningless work from that perspective, but I loved it because I had the connection. I was doing it with my best mate at the time. The two of us were just working, shifting boxes, and I actually loved that period of a couple of months because we found meaning in the work because we were building relationship and spending time together. So again, as leaders, you can highlight all of this if you're aware of it. Right. And the final one here is relationships. And I was telling that story about that meaningless work. It was meaningful because I was connected to my best mate, right? And so the relationship piece becomes really important as well. And just given time, I'm not going to spend too much time here. Knowing the people that are online, you guys know how to build meaningful relationships and how important connection is to building great culture, right? So really, once we start looking at this, hopefully you kind of understanding a few of those ideas and concepts that really plug into becoming an employer of choice, but you're understanding as well that being an employer of choice doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's supported by all the other aspects of healthy organizations, right? And so, yes, we need to focus on providing a great experience for our staff, but we also at the same time need to empower them and the rest of the people in our organization and motivate them to chase the organizational and customer results so that we have great performance and value that is being provided to support the culture. And therefore, the combination of all of that means we're an organization of choice, part of which is this organization, this employer of choice, where that's what's attractive to people. That's what's going to retain them in the long run. All right. And so that's kind of the thrust of what I was going to talk to you all about today. And, small group, but hopefully you have found it helpful. Hopefully you found it valuable. If this is something that you say, hey, there's some really good concepts that I'd love to tease out. I think there's people in my organization or people in my network that would love to hear this message. Then what I'd encourage you to do is reach out and we can have a conversation about potentially me coming and speaking to those most people, you can jump on the website, lumion.com.au, and you can put in an inquiry form there, or you can email operations@lumion.com. Either way, you reach out, we can organize a time to have a conversation. And I also really wanted to just highlight the Coaching Leader, the book that I wrote last year, specifically relates to the cultivation and the culture piece of what we spoke about today, and equipping leaders to, one, develop their people, so to cultivate capability, but also make a contribution to the culture and the connection as well. We talk about that in the book. And for you guys specifically, you can access that at the website, cliffordmorgan.com.au. And if you put a discount code of March webinar up until the 24th of April, that book will be 20% off, right? That discount code will get you 20% off the book. So only for a limited time, but thank you very much for joining me on the webinar. I wanted to leave you here today with this quote by Jack Welch, the famous long-term executive head of GE. He says, "The best thing about being a preferred employer is that you get good people. And this launches a virtuous cycle. The best team attracts the best team. Winning often leads to more winning. And that's a ride that you and your employees will never want to get off." And I think that really summarizes why being an employer of choice is such a good thing. So guys, that's the end of the webinar. There's a couple of minutes left that I've set aside specifically for questions. And this question Q&A part of these types of sessions is my favorite, right? I love the Q&A piece. So if you have any questions, feel free to jump off mute and just ask, right? If you've got scenarios or things that are going on in your world, I'd love to try and tailor this content to your specifics. Well, hey, what I'd love to hear from you is, what's the most valuable piece from today's concept? What's your key takeaway that you're going to take away and potentially share with someone else or action yourself? What's been most valuable to you? Discount on the book. Yes. Everybody loves a discount. It's being economical, right? I spoke about value in the economical benefit for it. So Robbie's saying cultivation and contribution, those two aspects, really important to those employee results, the employee experience. Yeah, that's right. Stephen's saying the link between performance culture and value. Yeah, so true, right? Unless the organization is performing and achieving those results, then essentially that's not going to be if it's not doing that, it's not attractive to staff. And if staff don't want to, that means you don't get the best staff, and the staff that are there are looking elsewhere, which means that when they engage with their clients or your customers, the customers aren't going to get the best experience because staff aren't motivated, morale's not high, culture's not great. And therefore the clients are less likely to come back or recommend or refer. And therefore that puts more strain on the organizational results, right? And so there is a really strong link between all three. I will often use the analogy of a bar stool where it has the three legs. If one of the legs is shorter than the others, then it's unstable, right? The organization's unstable. And here's what happens when people sit on a stool like that. Generally, they'll hop off, put it to the side, and they'll go get another stool where it is stable and everything's the same, all the legs are the same length. And so that's the same kind of thing that happens with your organization. If one of those three sets of results are out, then it becomes unstable, and staff will, at some point, if it doesn't get fixed, start to look elsewhere. Albie saying the key takeaway was the Venn diagram. Love how it all has a knock-on effect. Yeah, just what I was saying, Albie, about the interrelatedness of it all. And John, you're saying you really like the development piece around treating individual and everybody different. Don't treat them all the same. Yeah, 100%, right? Ultimately, if you're going to be an employer of choice, your staff are going to want to feel valued. They're going to want to feel supported. They're going to want to feel connected, and as I say, kind of the meaningful work piece. Now, everybody's different, so everybody connects in a different way. The way they feel supported is different, and so often there's a really nice piece of work done by Dr. Gary Chapman, social psychologist, who did a piece of work around how people feel appreciated and supported in the workplace, right? And so people have different languages, and depending on their personality and their preferences will depend on how they feel supported in the workplace. And some people, you know, it's kind of they lead the verbal encouragement, and that's how they feel supported. But other people, it's you know, their language is around acts of service and physically helping them out with work. And if you just try and encourage them and say, hey, I'm supporting you and you're doing a really great job, to someone who is more service oriented, then what happens is they go, yeah, that's all well and good, but that's all just words. If you really appreciated me, what you would do is sit down beside me and get some work done, right? So really being able to tailor your approach. The more you know about a person, the more you know what to leverage when it comes to leading them, motivating them, supporting them, and you know, making them feel like they are that they are an employee of choice, right? It goes both ways as well.